Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with U.S. Congressman Lou Correa at his office in Orange County, California. Lou and I have a long history of working together, dating back to 2006 when he was elected to the California State Senate. In this episode, Lou talks about his pursuit of the American dream and how he approaches his work with genuine passion for learning and understanding and what it takes to make the American dream obtainable for all. As a member of Congress, Lou serves on both the Judiciary and the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committees. On the Judiciary Committee, Lou is the ranking member and has a critical role in the important policy discussions regarding antitrust issues affecting big tech companies including Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Google. Lou emphasizes the importance of setting aside partisan differences to work together for the betterment of the American people. We always like getting together and catching up. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Congressman Correa. It is so good seeing you again.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah. You know, I've been in your office before, back when I was an elected official. You and I've, since about 2006, we've been working together in a lot of different capacities. And, you were always a friend of the cities. You were always, depending whether you were on the county supervisor, you were at the state and legislature there, and now in Congress. Just a tremendous amount of public service that you provide to Orange County. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and it's been an honor to work with you over the years, and like you said, both of us in different elected capacities, but both of us working for the benefit of our taxpayers.
That's right. Now, just a little bit of the background too is that, a lot of the issues that you focused on, like you said, were what the taxpayers were focused on. But, you and I did a lot of activity in water, wastewater with the veterans. One of the pictures that I showed you earlier before the interview was you and I up in Sacramento when I was the chairman of the Orange County Sanitation District. And, it was always good, with when you're on the city council and you've got to work with everybody on every area of government. You just got to really kind of bring back stuff for the city. I think it was because you started here in Orange County and kind of worked your way to different levels. You always seemed to be sympathetic and very helpful. And really, the politics didn't get involved. It was about getting stuff done.
Absolutely, Troy. And I'm an Orange County person, and I drink the water here. It's a special water. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do is fix problems for people. As elected officials, people hire us so they don't have to worry about things like wastewater. Mm-hmm. 80% of our wastewater here in Orange County is recycled. Mm-hmm. People don't know it. The only thing they know is we don't have to rely on outside water to Orange County as much as the other counties.
That's right.
We fix their problems before they have to think about it.
Yeah. And when you started out here in the local politics, I think it'd be interesting for the listeners to get an idea of your background, kind of where you started. The show really likes to profile folks from an American dream perspective. And, your background and coming into this and then what you've become. I'll remember before you kind of start talking about that, I remember in 2012, I was running for state assembly and I would go to a ton of different events. And you were at every event, like totally dedicated. And we did a lot of work in Little Saigon. At that time, I think that was a big part of your district. And it was interesting that my wife is a school teacher at La Quinta, and she even told me this morning to make sure, she goes, my students used to work for Representative Correa. And so even with the kids, it was, you were always visible, always in the community. And I think that probably started from your upbringing. Would you talk a little bit about, how you got to where you're at?
That's a good question. How much time you got, Troy? But let me summarize it very quickly.
Sure.
And I got to say that I never was looking to be an elected official. I never wanted to get into politics. And as you said, I was always looking for the American dream. The American dream made me. A little bit of a background. I'm an American-born citizen. But the first years of my life, I lived in Mexico. And when I came back to the U.S. in elementary school, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. The opportunities here in this country, the education, the roads to success are unbelievable. And if you come from another country, you really realize that there's so much opportunity in the U.S. And that's good for Americans, that's good for newcomers, but that's also good for this country. Mm-hmm. If you think about Google, Intel, all these high-tech firms that were started by immigrants with a lot of intellect. They benefited themselves and catapulted this nation to be the top leaders in technology of the world. And in many ways, when I got here, I focused on education. When you're a poor kid, that's what you got. This is what you can get. You go for it. And to me, education was my stairway to the middle class. And you mentioned my activities of being out in the community. I just want to tell folks, this is the way you do it. America. We get criticized for a lot of things. This is not a perfect country. But I got to tell you, we're leaders in economics. We have full employment. We need workers. We have the best technology for medicine, saving lives. We need to do a few more things to get it all right. But I got to tell you, we're doing a lot of things right. And I just want to let people know that you as a young person, you as a middle-class person, you as a middle-aged person can write your own script.
Right. No, it's incredible. A lot of opportunity, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. You started out too, not too far from where you actually represent. A lot of people grow up someplace, they move off, they do things. I know you ended up at UCLA. I'm sorry about that. Being a USC guy, I got to give you a little bit of a hard time there. But
that's okay.
Talk about your path through education there.
Well, I got to tell you, Troy, thank you for those words. But, and as an undergrad, I went to the Harvard of the West Coast, Cal State Fullerton. Okay, and people, this is a local university right down the street. I grew up in this area. I lived in apartments all my life. We were trying to survive, pay the rent, pay the bills. My dad had a good manufacturing job, good union job that paid him a good wage for us to survive. And that led me to Cal State Fullerton. I could afford it. Good place, good teaching institution. Then from there, like you said, I went to UCLA. I wanted to go to USC, but I couldn't afford it, my friend.
I hear you. No. And at UCLA, started studying law. So tell me about your interest in law. What got you focused in that area?
Well, I'll tell you more of my interest has been learning the American system, learning our financial system, learning our legal system. I kind of grew up with a high respect for lawyers. You're always, kind of freaking out as to what they were saying with all those legalese. Somebody would come to your door selling you the latest, greatest financial wizardry, which was a con artist. You went to the bank, you saw these institutions. When you're in school, you learn about these companies that are growing, and you learn that we're really the best in the world in terms of job creation, economic growth. I wanted to learn how the system worked. And so I got a law degree and an MBA. They probably a little bit too much in 4 years, but I learned so much that I wanted to keep learning. I went into banking after that because I still wanted to learn more. And, I realized that life itself is a journey of learning. And there's so much in this country. We are the leader in many ways. America is the leader, but that means you got to be sophisticated to be part of the system. And that's the challenge. We need to make sure we remind our young people, you got to get your education and move forward.
What was the spark that got you interested in elected office or involved in your community in that way?
Thank you. That's a great question. When I was in the private sector, I wanted nothing to do with politicians, with politics. Mm-hmm. And then the mid-1990s, I saw a lot of issues with California, the Golden State, policies that I didn't agree with. And so I was compelled to make a decision in my life. Do you just stand there and watch things happen and do nothing more than just be a voter, an educated voter? Or do you get in there and try to shape things, try to maneuver things? And I decided to do the latter, which is be a good voter, but also make sure you get yourself activated. Now, my mistake was when people learned who I was, that I had grew up in the area, they said, you ought to run for office. Lou, you ought to run for office. You're a good candidate. I should have said no, and I should have ran away. But I said, let me check this out. I'm interested. And something happened, which was I got addicted to public service. I got addicted to helping people in my communities, in my neighborhoods, in my cities. And ever since then, my passion is to go out to a Little League game. My passion, Friday nights, watch high school football. In the mornings to go help people. Mm-hmm. This is what I love.
In your first race, when you decide you're going to run for public office, as you get higher, you're obviously at the highest level. But each milestone that you reach, you start to get into a race, and people don't realize the amount of effort that it takes to run for office, and definitely for higher office. Maybe it was the county supervisor, maybe it was when you were at the state legislature, but can you describe a little bit of that first big race that you did and what your mindset was, and was it what you expected it to be once it started? Because once you're in and you're publicly out there, you're kind of held accountable by the public, fundraising, getting out to all these events, and you're not fully in marathon shape yet. I'll speak for myself. And some of us are balancing trying to provide for our families and do this. But once you start, it's public. And you've just seemed to had a way of going about, because I noticed a lot of political people in Orange County kind of come to you for advice. I was just kind of curious, like what your perspective would be that first race and what, when you cross the threshold.
My first race was an interesting one. I was a novice in politics. And so I didn't quite understand as a Democrat what it meant to take on Republican Orange County. I had a lot of good friends that were Republicans, and many people thought I was a Republican, okay? I have friends on both sides of the aisle. So to get in and to get into this fight between one side and the other was something new to me. Yet that was one of my strengths, and I'll tell you why. As a person who grew up in this area, I had friends everywhere, okay? People often think you got to run for office, you got to have a bunch of money, you got to outraise the other person. Well, money is important, but it's not the ultimate factor. What do you need money for? Hire volunteers. You need money to do polling, to do data, to find out what the community is all about. You need money to essentially put together a machine with people. But think about it. If you've lived here like I have all my life, you don't need as many paid volunteers. You can go out and get your friends and neighbors to help you. I don't need the polling. I know my friends and neighbors. I know what they think. I know what they eat. I know how they feel. And so I didn't need as much money. And so a lot of people when I first ran said, you're not going to do well, Lou. You're going to lose. And they were right. I lost, but by 93 votes.
Oh, wow.
But I got to tell you, the one equalizer I have that I had then, that I have today is that I work hard. Mm-hmm. Troy, the sacrifices I've made, and my family. My wife is very supportive, and my kids are very supportive. but we put in a lot of time, money of our own and effort in these races. And so it's a team effort. But every time I go out and I'm at an event and I see somebody that I grew up with and they come and give me a hug and we reminisce, that's golden.
Yeah.
And I work for them, and it's a great time.
As you progress through your different levels of politics, and you got, like I said, you had a really good run at county supervisor, you had a really good run up at state and then at federal. Can you kind of just like hit the mountaintops of like county? What was like one or two things that was kind of interesting there? And then as you made it to state, because it just seems definitely watching that as a mayor, you really have to be really careful of making sure like how things work. It took a long time to understand, and so not only was, it's nice to have somebody, especially in California, it was in the majority at the state level, but it was actually how did that building work in Sacramento and there's a whole machine up there. When you're in Orange County, it has sometimes a little bit of a different political leaning. You can't be left behind. So you got to be able to and you're always a good guide to be able to do that. And so I was just curious, like at the county supervisor level and at the state, we'll talk about Congress in a minute. What were some of the like highlights of being at the county?
The county board of supervisors, in my opinion, is the best job in the world. You're an executive and you're also a legislative body. You do it all. And this is the second or third largest county in California, so that your budget is there. You can make things happen. But what I've learned is my experience in Sacramento helps with the county because everything is interconnected. Federal dollars to the state, to the county, federal dollars to the county, state dollars to the county, accountability, responsibility, checks and balances, it's all interconnected. So it helped me make those connections. But the one thing, Troy, that I never forgot is that at the end of the day, you have to implement policies or you got to vote to make sure that you take care of Main Street. You got to make sure that everything you're doing helps people on Main Street. And that's very hard sometimes when you're in Sacramento, when you get the machine that's pounding on you to do this or that, and you say, no, this is against the interests of my district. And so when you take on the machine, you feel it. But at the end of the day, I think that's part of the reason I'm still here.
Right.
Is that people remember that I'm fighting for them.
Yeah, as you went up to Sacramento, you had to get up every week and actually get on a plane versus when I talk to other county supervisors in my 12 years, they love that job because they get out of bed and they're in their district, but when you're heading up there and now you make a 3,500 mile trip every week to DC, it definitely adds, like you said, the complications. Your family really has to be involved and, I really appreciate the fact that you acknowledge your wife's involvement and support and family because it seems like without that, it would be very hard to do that job that you do.
I fly 7,000 miles a week now. I go back and forth every week to Washington, like I did to Sacramento every week, because I need to be connected with my community. I need to make sure I know what they're thinking, what the issues are, and to work with them. What am I going to do in a weekend in Washington? Idle time is the devil's time.
Yeah.
I want to be there to work. I can't work there on the weekends. I can work here on the weekends. It's important that we have the connection there.
To shift a little bit now to Washington, D.C., you 2016, you got elected to Congress. You've been really kind of making a difference, year by year, term by term, and with so many different members. There's some members that, like you and I've talked about before, that are the loud members that kind of get a lot of the fanfare in the media, and sometimes maybe don't represent the collegial events that happen, I believe, in Congress. And the amount of work that can get done when people are working together. I noticed that you and we can talk a little bit about this, but you served, you currently serve on the Committee for Homeland Security, which is near and dear to my heart, and also on the Judiciary Committee. And on Homeland Security, as the Chief Financial Officer, the main interactions I had with the House Committee was mainly finance, systems modernization, stuff like that. But I noticed that you have really taken on a pretty significant level of responsibility in that Homeland Security Committee. And I was just wondering if you might just talk about that experience and how that is, because I don't think a lot of people understand Congress. You go there and you represent people when you're there, and you do the votes that everybody reads about in the newspaper, but you also get assigned special committees. And you and I are really close to this, so of course we know this, but a lot of people that listen to the podcast and they don't realize how much work you have to put in when you get assigned to these committees. And so I just think it'd be interesting if you just give a little bit of responsibility. And you're on two pretty high profile ones, the Homeland Security and Judiciary. Could you talk first about Homeland Security?
Absolutely. Government, United States government, the United States, Washington, D.C., the center of power in the world. After World War II, we were it. Today, we are still the center of power militarily, economically, technologically, every other way. Everything happens in Washington. We get visitors from all over the world to advise us, to tell us what's going on their part of the world. Homeland Security, okay? You think about Washington real big, but you got to specialize. You've got to get things done, and that's the area that I took on, Homeland Security. What's Homeland Security? After 9/11, we in government, we in Washington decided to create a committee, a department that will oversee security for the United States. We didn't want another 9/11. So we have the FBI under our jurisdiction. We have the Coast Guard under our jurisdiction. We have a dozen organizations to protect the United States, but also to make sure we assure that we have the resources to survive long term. It's a big job, and what I have done is taken the opportunity to try to find out what our men and women at the working level need to do their job correctly. So I spend a lot of my time visiting our borders, visiting our ports of entry, visiting other countries where we have representation to see how we can connect the dots, meaning what is it that we have to do to know when somebody may be looking to harm us. And so those are the things I'm doing on a day-to-day basis.
So in the vein of what your kind of brand, at least within Orange County that you're known of, is kind of working across the aisle. I know that Representative Higgins is kind of your co-chair, or he is the chair, I guess, for the subcommittee that you're on. And a couple months ago, I remember reading in the newspaper, you had done kind of some legislation on human trafficking and stuff like that. Those are types of opportunities that seems like you seem to look for.
When I got to Washington, Clay and I were like oil and water. We just didn't mix.
Yeah.
Clay's from Louisiana. He's a sheriff. He's a tough guy. But we kept talking, and we have developed a great relationship, a personally strong relationship. Mm-hmm. He's the chair of the committee I serve on, and I'm his ranking member, meaning I'm the top Democrat. And we both have bonded together to essentially propose legislation to reinforce our national security. So, we talked, a lot of things we disagree on, but a lot of things we agree on. And we are working on some good stuff.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. And then I maybe I'm going to pull privilege here. I would like to talk a little bit about your actions on the Judiciary Committee.
Yes.
And good for Orange County. You're a ranking member on in the Antitrust section of the Judiciary. So talk about that, because I know there was a lot of legislation. I'm in the tech industry. And so I see a lot of stuff that kind of goes on in the tech industry, and you wouldn't normally see someone like yourself being taking some of the positions, and I think it's been interesting to watch. And now you're in a pretty important position within the antitrust portion of the subcommittee for judiciary. And I was just curious, like, without maybe even getting into the details of the role or the activities that you're looking at, just from your perspective, that experience to be able to be elevated to that level, that had to be a great experience.
It was an honor to be there and a privilege to be the ranking member on antitrust. Chairman Massey, I believe, is from Kentucky.
Yep.
I have a great working relationship with him as well. And, antitrust, you think of the big committee where we had impeachments of President Trump. Now we're looking at impeachments of the Biden administration, personnel, Mayorkas, and some of the others. And that's what'll take 80% of the oxygen on TV. But we really do a lot of basic work there. Antitrust also deals with bankruptcy.
Yep.
What are the rules for bankruptcy? Student debt bankruptcy. Let's look at that. Loan forgiveness, everybody's talking about. What about the aspect of student bankruptcy? Student debt is the only debt in society that you can't dispose of with bankruptcy. Is that good or bad? Let's look at those issues. High tech versus big tech versus bigger high tech. Competition, how do you manage that? Government has a role to make sure that there is competition and there's entrepreneurship, innovation. Like I said, Intel, Microsoft, Apple, Google, these firms, you got to make sure they continue to create jobs, but they don't stifle competition. Other areas, grocery stores, antitrust, is Costco, Walmart, the small guys, Kroger, the big guys, how do they interact? At the end of the day, I want to make sure that the person on Main Street has the best price possible, best quality products when they go spend their money. And so all that stuff, I got to translate into good stuff for people on Main Street.
Yeah, no, a lot of responsibility, and like you said, I do follow a lot of the business trends, and so antitrust, especially with tech right now, a big deal. Just to pivot a little bit away from that type of stuff, back here, I noticed Michelle Steele, a colleague here within the Orange County caucus. You guys have been working together. I noticed there was some work in the Vietnamese community earlier in the beginning of the year. I remember seeing something. I travel a lot, but I do kind of keep track of you guys. And could you talk about a little bit, like within your community, one or two big things that are going, whether it's, like I said, working with Congressman Steele, helping the Vietnamese community, or other areas of focus that seem to be kind of an area that you would think the listeners would be interested in?
Sure. Michelle Steele and I have been friends for probably 20 years. We were both at the state, worked together on issues, a lot of taxpayer issues. And today she represents Little Saigon, which is the biggest population of Americans of Vietnamese heritage, Vietnamese Americans outside of Vietnam, here in Orange County. I also have represented that area. And so we have a lot of things in common. But interestingly enough, you saw President Biden just went to the G20 meeting. He stopped off at India, Vietnam, and you begin to see the world transforming itself in terms of economically, politically, and other ways. And I know Michelle and I, given our strong relationship to the Vietnamese community here in OC, the Orange County Vietnamese community has educated us on important issues in Vietnam. The Vietnam War, 40, 50 years ago. A lot has happened since. And now it looks like we're developing stronger relations with Vietnam for military, economic, but we can't forget human rights.
That's right.
And so we are working on these things, Michelle Steele, Lou Correa, to make sure that our views, our American values, are not set aside as we pursue economic and other ties with Vietnam and other parts of the world. So, you ask about Michelle Steele and Lou working together. We are working on issues that are important to the American people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, my wife works in Little Saigon. We do a lot of activities there in that community. And, I don't know if you knew this. I grew up in Midway City, And
I didn't know that.
yeah, so until I was 9 years old, my dad built a house, and there was a certain point at about 6, 7, 8 where that was the same time they had, down at the Marine base, at Camp Pendleton, they were doing, they're bringing folks in from Vietnam, and we started realizing like they were putting a lot of folks in Midway City. Because it was county unincorporated, there wasn't like a local mayor and city council, so they were able to. And the next thing you know is like the schools were getting filled up, and there was not enough room. They were putting trailers out on the fields, and I remember that just being like experiencing it. I was 9. My dad's like, I don't know what's happening here. Like they weren't paying attention. And so, it's been a full circle to me. It's like, I didn't understand it as a kid when it was happening as somebody here. And now when at the point I'm at, and I've been in elected office and see how important that community is, there's nobody more patriotic than those folks in that community. And it's, and it's just really, but that just shows you, I think it helps me as somebody that was in political in elected office is like you really do got to learn and figure out like how do you represent everybody.
It's interesting, Troy, because you're 7, 8 when that happened. That was probably in 1975.
It was.
That was the fall of Saigon. I know because a little older than you, I was at Cal State Fullerton as a freshman, and I saw the wave of new Vietnamese students coming into Cal State Fullerton, and so you did see this shift. This immigrant wave, this new population coming into Southern California. And 40, 50 years later, you see how the Vietnamese community has really transformed Western Orange County. I mean, we have generals that are, now Vietnamese Americans that are generals in our military, entrepreneurs, very successful businessmen. And so you see this immigrant wave changing our dynamic, our economy for the positive. Mm-hmm. And here in Orange County, I've seen Vietnamese, the Middle Eastern. We have Little Arabia in Anaheim now. You see their positive contributions as well. I see these very successful businessmen that are just really on top of their issues. And now you have a wave of Ukrainians, and then you have Russians coming in. So this is what America is really about. Like you said, you look and you say, oh, it's a new group. Mm-hmm. And then you see them step up and really take the baton in terms of leadership in America. Today, California, we complain a lot. It's very expensive. It is. Regulation, taxes. We are the 4th largest economy in the world. You got the U.S., you got China, Japan, then California. And for some reason, people continue to come to the Golden State. Right. People continue to be integrated into our system, economic, cultural, social. And that to me speaks volumes of California. There is hope. Absolutely. We're optimistic that California will continue to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I see, I have a business activities in Dallas and Texas and all over the U.S. And and a lot of my friends have left California, and it's like
mine too.
Yeah, and it's for me, I'm drawing a line. We're gonna try to make it a better place, and try to, whether it's keeping your businesses here and doing that type of stuff. So I definitely appreciate kind of what you're saying.
I think it's the story of the American dream again. We started talking about Lou, the American dream. It's really an American dream open to those from around the world. As Ronald Reagan used to say, the shining beacon upon that hill that beckons all. This is United States of America, and I think California too. We get folks from all over the world that come in with nothing but an empty pocket, a lot of dreams, and the ganas, we call in Spanish the ganas, the desire to work really hard. And I'm serving right now in Congress with people like you, Troy. I got a couple of individuals who, I'm not going to mention them by name, but came to this country, couldn't speak English, got their, PhDs in stuff like chemistry, and now they're very successful businessmen, built up tremendous businesses, and they're in Congress. Back home, they would have never served in their Congress. Back in Mexico, nobody would let me serve in Congress. But in this country, the American dream.
Yeah.
And that's why I love this country. Is it half empty or half full? It's half full. Still got a lot of work to do, absolutely. But I got to tell you, I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
Yeah, no, we're very blessed to be here. Lou, as I get ready to wrap this up, I was just kind of curious, kind of closing, for folks that are out there that are listening to this and they're trying to balance between that professional career and wanting to get involved in their community, or it may not even be in elected office, but anything, or they're involved in their career and that they have something they're very passionate about. There was that demarcation point where, you said, hey, I'm going to do this. You said at the beginning, I'm interested, I'm going to look into it. Kind of in closing, anything that you would recommend to the listeners from your perspective of when people are at that point and they're trying to make it, they're fork in the road and they got to kind of figure out, hey, I really do need to give back, or I really, I've been able to, I can walk and chew gum. Ron Bates, one of my buddies, used to always make that comment, if you remember Ron, and he would always say, Troy, you got to be able to walk and chew gum. And, you got to do that for a moment before you make the pivot. You've made the pivot. Anything you would leave for the listeners?
Yeah, the pivot, I would say, is not running for office or not, but the pivot is in recognizing that, in this world, as much as there's opportunity in America, nobody makes it on their own. I can tell you the teachers, the counselors, the neighbor that would go out of their way to give me some advice, okay? A lot of times our youth are lost, are confused, lack real guidance to somewhere. We have a lot of families that are single parent families. We got kids growing up that you don't have that, guidance. It doesn't take much to go and volunteer. I remember Supervisor Chuck Smith, who preceded me in the County Board of Supervisors. He had a program that he would go out once a week for an hour, Fridays. He'd go to a local elementary school and read to the kids, just read to them, and they would come and ask him questions. And I've had that happen to me. I'll go tell high school kids my story, and a lot of them will come up to me and start asking questions. Sheepishly, they don't want to embarrass themselves with a question, and they'll come to me afterwards and say, can I talk to you? This is what's going on in my life. And I'll say, yeah, that's what happened in mine. You're not different. You're not weird. Mm-hmm. You're just surviving like all of us. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, I thought the problems that I had were unique to me. Then I found out the other kids were going through the same challenges like me. So the pivot is really one of saying, you know what? I have something to contribute. I'll talk to 10 kids and I'll probably reach 1 or 2. But 20 years later, when those 1 or 2 come to you and say, thank you for changing my life, that, my friend, is a magic moment.
Lou, thank you so much for taking the time
Troy.
Today. This has been a great time.
And thank you for your friendship, my friend. Let's keep working together.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.